Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the panel for being here and for your work. I want to start with a question to you, Dr. Matheny. I am chair of something called the Subcommittee on Emerging Threats, subcommittee of this Homeland Security Committee, and I focus there, among other things, on the risks that artificial intelligence could pose to the cybersecurity of critical infrastructure like electric grids and hospitals. So you talked a little bit about some of the risks that AI poses, but can you expand a little bit? How does AI impact the cybersecurity threat landscape, and are there opportunities to utilize AI to counter these threats?
Thanks, Senator, for the question. The application that has probably gained the most public attention of these large language models is generating language that we're familiar with, natural language. So creating an English poem or an English short story. What's getting less attention but could be more impactful in security is the application of these large language models to be used for software generation, code generation, and computer programming languages rather than a natural language. And some of these applications are already fairly sophisticated, and an increasing fraction of new software engineering is taking place with the use of, or assistance of, large language models. If this trend continues, it's quite possible that the offensive cyber capabilities that today are accessible only to state-level actor offensive cyber programs could be accessible to a much larger number of actors, simply by having access to tools that are able to generate software at scale and requiring much less technical sophistication to do so. Those could pose risks then to critical infrastructure and other networks that are sensitive.
And thank you for that. Are there capacities that could help counter that AI gives us?
The same tools can also be used to scale up cyber defense. And I think this will be a cat and mouse race to figure out, are the applications on the defensive side keeping up with the applications on the offensive side? I don't know the answer to that question. I think it will be a continuous competition between offense and defense. But we need to make sure that our cybersecurity organizations are keeping up with the trends in these large language models as they're applied.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you, Dr. Matheny. AI capabilities will offer new opportunities for the intelligence community, theoretically at least to improve national security. Are there ways you believe that AI can improve intelligence analysis?
Yes, I think that the application of AI systems, particularly in open source data, where the volumes of data exceed our ability to analyze using manual methods, is one of the most important areas for intelligence. We could be making use of a much broader range of open source imagery, open source text, in order to understand what's happening in the world much faster and be able to share it with the world much more quickly. As we're seeing from the war in Ukraine, when we're able to share open source information, we're able to change the way the world understands what's happening in a part of the world that we don't have direct access to.
Thank you. And then another question for you, Dr. Matheny. We know that government initiatives generally involve a number of different federal agencies. And one of the things I'm interested in is how can the federal government ensure that their agencies are coordinating with one another on AI research and deployment for potential joint projects or initiatives?
Thanks, Senator. One of the things that RAND has been working on over the years is how investments by one organization within the federal government, say one of our R&D organizations, can be more broadly shared across the government faster, and how we can harmonize different efforts so that we're not duplicating efforts in one area of research, so that tools that are created by one agency can be leveraged by another, and so that standards that are used by one agency, say for AI being used for a particular application, can be harmonized with those in another agency. I think there are great gains in efficiency. One of the ways of harmonizing this would be through federal procurement and ensure that we're using a consistent set of standards. Another would be through agencies like the National Institute of Standards and Technology that have a key role to play in creating test frameworks and test beds where we can robustly evaluate the performance of these AI systems.
Thank you. And now a question for Professor V, as I will call you, and Ms. Givens. This is a question for both of you. There is growing concern among workers in many industries that AI could fundamentally change the nature of work in unpredictable ways. You've touched on this a little bit, but do you have recommendations for how the federal government should be addressing challenges that companies and employees face from the use of AI in the workplace? And Dr. V, I'll start with you.
Thank you for the question, Senator. I think there are two parts to this, to helping workers deal with displacement due to AI. One, of course, is training and skilling, and the federal government can invest effort and research into helping workers train for our STEM-enabled world. And I think the federal government is doing that, and we can do definitely a lot more than that. I think it's even more important that we make sure that that training and those access to those skills is widely distributed, and not just to those who have access to those already. So that's one thing. I think another component of this is when we talk about worker displacement due to AI, I fundamentally believe it's because of overpromising on the part of AI systems that tends to not play out when these systems are deployed. Systems are presented as being able to replace, because of efficiencies, workers, but in fact, they cause more problems than they deserve, and it's precisely because there isn't governance, there isn't the supervision, there isn't the human supervision around these systems. So I would argue that rather than thinking about workers displaced by AI, if we put proper governance and structures in place, we will need more jobs for workers, in fact, to make sure that these systems that are supposed to assist them are not replacing them and doing it badly.
Thank you. Ms. Givens?
One of the questions is to think not just about displacement, but if we're striving for a goal of workers working alongside AI systems, what does that interaction actually look like? And we're seeing this play out now, right? You can think about fulfillment centers, for example, where workers are actually tasked with extreme specificity to every motion that they take in the name of efficiency. There are business reasons for doing that, but there are also very real human impacts on the workers who are micromanaged at that level and live in a far more surveilled environment than they did before. Delivery van drivers, there are many other examples of this. So there we need to think about things like workplace health and safety. OSHA has a role to play, the Department of Labor has a role to play, and we need to think about enforcement both of existing laws and how we create a movement for employers to understand what responsible practices look like and for workers to know and understand their rights.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.